I'm Lexi Davis, a love embodiment coach who helps people create a love that feels like home, and I'm here to bring more romance and playfulness into the world. I'm also an international retreat host, vibe curator, and human connector. I serve people through my business, Alive to Enjoy, and this podcast where I invite guests from around the world to sprinkle their wisdom and expand your perspective so you can create the deepest love you possibly can reach in this lifetime. I also want you to live the most joyous life, whatever that looks like to you, and I hope that this slice of the internet brings you lots of smiles and helps you keep your heart open. Thank you for choosing Heart Snuggles to be in your ears each week, and I'm so glad you're here with me. Welcome, Heart Snugglers, to another lovely podcast episode with a gorgeous, gorgeous woman who is one of my internet friends. I don't even know when we first connected, but I'm so excited. She's full of wisdom and magic and radiance, and it's going to be a juicy episode. So why don't you let them know a little bit about you?
Hi guys, it's Lori here. So my platform at the moment is working a lot with energy and working with beautiful souls from all over the world. Essentially, I came into this space from a very young age, really young. I have been working with energy and with guides from a young age, but like most of us, we kind of are not quite sure of the power that we hold as children. We just think we're playing with fairies or we're playing with, our imaginary friends, but energy surrounds us and spirits surround us. And, over the years, I lost touch with that, but have started to develop a more love and patience and kindness with myself and that realm. And through the connectedness that, brought me here, I'm able to tune into it so much more now in my older age and walk with it, and now walk with others and connect with others and give them the wisdom and the energy that they need too, and creating beautiful communities. So yeah, it's been a beautiful journey and I'm still on it. There's so many more years of it to come, and I am just excited to be here because it connects me with people like you, Lex.
Yay! It's so true. When we're little, we're coming straight from that world, right? We are just full of joy, imagination, of play. And so I love that you realize, I get to tap back into that and help other people as well. So beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's it. We don't even know when we're younger that we suppressed it, It just happens over years of basically being told, oh, just cut that out, and that's not real, and magic isn't real, and all of these one-liners. And over time you're like, oh yeah, shit, probably not,
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, we come straight from that world with all this beautiful knowledge, and then we're just like, oh, must be something else, it must be fantasy, and then we just file it.
No more. We're waking everyone up to their magic. Okay, so we're going to start with the first two questions and we'll dive into your juiciness. So the first question is, what was the last random act of kindness someone did for you?
Ooh, it was the most beautiful moment. I took myself out. I love going on dates for myself. I love taking myself on beautiful little dates and finding little spots that are tucked away. And one weekend I took myself to this really cute cafe and would never go in there and would never been to that area before. Found myself waltzing into this cafe and sitting down, and because I had no idea what was happening with me that day, like I didn't know what I wanted, I just kind of packed a whole bag of my journal, my books, my coloring pencils, like everything. So I took myself to this cafe and I set up as if I was about to host a meeting for like 10 people, but it was just me and my mind and my my body. And I ordered myself breakfast, and it was the sweetest, slowest morning. The gentleman that was working there came over and he just like had to pause me, and he goes, I am just really in awe of what you are doing right now. Like, I have been watching you. He's like, not to be creepy, but I have been watching you, and I'm just really in awe of how connected you are with yourself in this moment. It's like, it's nice to see someone that is so embedded in their own world and, using like things like a journal or the reading and just connecting with themselves in that way and not so invested in technology. And he, like, the way that he spoke to me, it was like he was speaking to maybe like an inner version of myself that I have been trying to nourish for the past few years. And it was just nice to be fully seen in that element. And then he basically gave me everything on the house, and he's, do you want a piece of cake as well? Like, he was just so lovely. But it was the fact that he in his busyness, I mean, the restaurant was packed. It was a Sunday morning. He had so much going on and he was running around, but in his busyness was able to acknowledge a moment that was really special for me as well. And it was that connectedness that we had as beings, and just everything stopped in that moment for him to just go, you know what, like, this is amazing. It's so beautiful to see you just take yourself out and just honor yourself. And I think that that's something that we are so, like, that we've lost contact with or lost touch with over time. We feel like it's almost weird if someone is on their own in a cafe just taking themselves on a date with 50 coloring pencils and, you know, and a book.
I got chills when you said that. It was so beautiful how he really saw you. And
Yeah.
yeah, what a beautiful moment. I love this story. Thanks for sharing. Okay, now for a more maybe uncomfy story. We on this podcast, we like to melt away shame and make things more normalized. So if you could share maybe a more shameful memory of around sex or love that you've experienced in your life or relationships.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I've got this podcast at a really interesting time because I'm currently moving through the emotion of the amount of time that I offered my body up when it wasn't fully ready to receive from the masculine or give to the masculine. It was like, there's been so many years, I guess, or relationships or connections that I've had where it was almost like a internal thought that I just had to do this. I just had to have sex. I just had to be intimate. And lately I've been doing a lot of self-discovery and maybe purging, I'd say, in a way. So the most recent experience I've had is I had a breathwork and Reiki session, which was really powerful. And in that, I was able to express anger for the amount of times that I gave myself up in those situations and just thought that that was the right thing to do, but recognizing how much I was not connected with my body in those moments. But because I thought that, okay, no, but I love this person, so it's okay, right? It's okay to just have sex with them, even if I'm not really in my body right now. And so there's still so much in that was stored within my womb, and I felt it, and it was a stagnant energy that was just circling in my womb. And I, as a practitioner, have been trying to get it out. But this recent experience, it was like I just roared and allowed all this shame and anger to come out. But then the best part of it is that through that movement and through feeling those emotions, I was able to actually feel love as well, not only for the person that I was interacting with in those moments, but for myself, for not actually knowing at that time what was going on and not being so hard on myself that, you know, like, it's okay that happened, but, you know, like, you're knowing now and you're learning now and you're growing now. And so as we move through, you can take what you're learning and go with that and move through with that, you know. And it's a different perception to have, rather than maybe back then I just was doing it willingly and not as connected and conscious with my own being. So that's
I'm
probably
sure
the
we can all resonate with that.
yeah.
Yes, and we didn't fully mean yes. And
Yeah.
even in those moments too, like not even really being aware of it and maybe not even really noticing the like ickiness that you feel afterwards and how that still affects you to this day. Like you just said, it was released presently. And
Yeah.
such a good reminder of how the body keeps score.
Well, that's it. And I don't think we're actually aware of how much we can connect with our bodies. So we just feel like, I mean, we've been told, right? We've always been told, whether it's verbally or watching a movie or seeing it on social now, which is so much more accessible. We've always been taught and told of how to show up in this world. And the one thing that we aren't taught of is how to actually just go, hang on, what do I want? What do I want in this moment? Rather than what that movie has just told me or someone else has just told me. It's like, what do I want? And especially when it comes to maybe something like a relationship, we feel like the next step is to do this and to do that, and to connect in the way of intimacy all the time, to just feel that validation and that love. And so when you're operating from that space, I find that you're almost using intimacy as like such a tool, and sometimes maybe not using it in a way that actually resonates with you, because you're not feeling into what you need or what that love language is to you.
Yeah, and it's almost a combination of filling a void and also sometimes just pleasing them because you don't want them to feel bad. So you're putting their emotions in front of yours, because if you say no, then they're going to feel rejected and all these other things. And it would just be easier to just say yes and do the thing and then get it over with. And it's just this
Yeah,
like endless, not good loop.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I
Mm.
think in some cases that can create some toxicity between two people and within yourself. I mean, yeah, it energy stores. It lives within us.
Which is a perfect segue to what we want to talk about today. So we were having a chat on Instagram and I was thinking, wow, this is gold and something that I experience a lot and you physically work on people with. So I would love to tap into this idea of how energy is stored in our bodies, how we might be unaware of it, and especially the emotion of grief, because you and I are both experiencing grief right now, as well as I feel a lot of people in a collective grief / we all have grief, of course, and are very unaware of how to process it. I only recently, learned how to process my grief. So yeah, starting wherever you want to start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, as I was just saying, in the terms of how energy stores within our body, I think grief, like we were talking about that day, is such a big one for us, because we experience grief in so many different ways, whether it's a loss of a loved one, a loss of an item, a loss of job. There's so many different things that we experience in this world emotionally. And like I was saying, in the sense of not actually connecting with ourselves, it's like, because we don't know how to process those kinds of emotions, we begin to store and we suppress. And so sometimes we feel like we're dealing with something, like we have a cry and we're like, okay, that's good, that's done. And sometimes that's all you need, right? But when it does come to things that have genuinely hurt us, just because we go out for a drink, or we go to a concert, or we do something that distracts us in that moment, that doesn't mean that the grief just goes away, or the emotion that we were feeling 5 minutes before exiting our door goes away. That emotion physically stores within our body. And this is something that I see quite a bit with my clients, is we work through that emotion and it comes out as different kind of energy, and I think the main thing is where we swallow our grief and where we store our grief is right down in our root chakra. So it takes quite a while before that can exude out of us. And unless we're doing the work to really bring it out and cleanse it, then there isn't too much. Unless we do the work, whether it is really allowing it to be present, allowing grief to be present, or allowing any kind of emotion to be present. And in that, like, that's for joy as well, like really feeling into these kind of emotions, they will forever just store in our subconscious. So I like to look at the subconscious as almost like a filing cabinet, right? It's like your present body and your physical body will always be showing up in this world, but your subconscious body and your energetic body has so many different layers and so many different areas, and it ambers like from your being. And you think of, like, if you look at your body as the physical being, there are like trillions more of you that are just energetically bursting out of you, right? And in these subconscious layerings, there's every little bit of trauma, emotion, joy. There's so many different layers of it, and it stores there in this filing cabinet. And until you actually allow them to physically be present with you and walk with you, rather than trying to burn them or suppress them, or what you think is deal with them in maybe unhealthy ways, they're going to always be knocking at that door, just waiting for you to deal with them. And I like to think of it as like allowing yourself to just really tap into the energy of what that message is, or what they're trying to tell you, or what it is that you need to work through. And when you sit in that space, and sometimes it's just fucking screaming it out and allowing it to be present and allowing it to be known, you know. For example, grief, we're told that you can only grieve for a certain period of time, you know, especially when it comes to relationships. It's like, fuck that. The quickest way to get over someone is to get under someone else. And that is the biggest load of baloney, you know, like it is. I think it's the quickest way to pop it into your subconscious, that's for sure. But you're not actually dealing with it because you're not allowing that love that you once had to exist, you know. And so creating moments where you can acknowledge things for how they were, how they will be, and allowing the polarity between the two to coexist is probably the best way to deal with any kind of energy, I'd say.
I agree. I think it's really important to, instead of trying to fix it, we're so quick to wanting to fix our emotions and to change it and to make it what we think it should be. And even the whole timeline thing, like, no, I'm only supposed to feel sad for X amount of time. And that's just totally ignoring your body's own wisdom of what it's actually trying to show you. And something that I really like that you said was about how grief shows up. You think you cry once and you're done. And this is something I've been facing a lot with my current uncoupling, and being like, I spent a whole month deep in every single emotion that wanted to be present. And then it was still coming up. And I was fighting myself thinking, no, 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 no. We already did this. I already felt that. I already dealt with this fear. And the body still wanted to process it, and to know there's so many layers, and to not make it wrong when it's still coming up, and to just allow. And I understand that we don't all have the leisure like I do to just take a day off and process, because I cannot physically work when I'm in that. However, it's really creating that space to listen to the body. And even if in the morning you couldn't do it, like at nighttime or something, can you create the space? And something that's been really crazy for me that I've never been able to do before is access grief on demand now. And my friend and I do a swamping practice with Mama Gina, she calls it, where you basically feel emotions for like 30 minutes. And it's crazy how quickly when someone says feel grief, or I'm like, okay, let me feel my grief, I can just turn it on. And it shows like how much your body remembers things and how it actually all is sitting in there. And since I didn't spend most of my life dealing with grief in this way, there's a lot to be felt.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. I think we're told when we need to feel grief, it's either anger or letting it out in ways that aren't actually accessing it in a way that's allowing it to be present. You know, I think what you're speaking about is quite beautiful, because you're allowing it to coexist with you, like I was saying earlier, and it's allowing it to have space in your world. It's not allowing grief to just happen when things are really sad. It's like, okay, just show me what grief feels like today. And I think that's a beautiful example of how connected we could be with our bodies and with our souls, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely agree with the timeline with it, like in saying that, because yeah, we are feeling like we need there's so much pressure these days, right? And you see it everywhere. We feel like we have to hurry up in this life, whether it is with grief, whether it is with joy, whatever it is. We feel like we have to always be in the next element of the world or next element of our lives, and we can't just slow down and enjoy the right now, whether that's happiness or sadness, because there are moments in all of them to enjoy. We feel like we have to push past things. And it's crazy because we sit there and ask the universe for so many messages or so many moments in our life. But when they arrive, it's like, okay, what's the next one I want to ask for? And it's like, allow yourself to just exist in that present moment. I think, if I keep using relationships as an example, because they've probably been one of my biggest lessons in this world, you know. I mean, I've had so many, but the most beautiful lessons I've learned have been in some of the most beautiful relationships. And I think one thing that I recognize is that I never had to suppress the emotions of joy. I allowed them to be because I loved them and they were exciting. But as soon as the discomfort came from anger and grief and having to let go, it's like, well, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel these things. These aren't happy things. And so that's where the suppression steps in, because it's like, oh, you don't want to feel that? Okay, that's fine. We'll save it for another day, and the more that you keep saving it for another day, it's going to come up and be like, hey, remember back in 2016, we didn't deal with something. Is today a good day to deal with it? It's not like it just goes, oh, she didn't want to deal with it, so I'm going to go on vacation for the rest of my life. Like, it wants you to just see it and acknowledge it and see it as a beautiful thing, like allowing it to just be part of you and walk with you is something that is so beautiful. You can gift yourself. And I encourage people that are listening to just have moments where you tap into that. And if something is really shit, allow it to be shitty. You don't have to turn everything into a positive. Sometimes the shittiness is the most beautiful lesson.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, when did we make it wrong or not a good thing to feel? When really, like, I've found when I actually let myself go there and fully let go, first off, it usually only takes a few minutes, and then I'm on a whole nother level. I'm light and feel liberated and feel so expansive when I just truly create this space. I have a perfect example. Yesterday, I got some news and it sent me, and I just started crying. And my friend's mom came in. She was like, "What's wrong?" And then I told her, and she said, "Oh, we all go through that. Like, come with us. We're going to lunch right now." And I made myself like get up, and then I thought, "No, I need some space right now to just feel." And they all said, "Oh, no, no, just come, just come. Everyone feels sad. Like, you'll get over it." And it's so interesting how people just address it that way. And then I just stepped my foot down and I said, no, I actually need some space for myself right now to just feel and be by myself. And I'm so grateful I did. As soon as everyone left, I curled into a little ball and it just wailed so loudly. Within 5 minutes, I was already feeling so much better. And I was so proud of myself for making that choice, because here are like 5 people telling me to just come and get over it, and to like fight back and stand in my own knowing that actually we feel so much better instead of going to get some food right now to just feel my emotions. And yeah, and like I also think about this concept too. Oh, that was something else you said, how we ask for these things, right? Like I keep asking for the most divine aligned love, and I want like the greatest love of this lifetime. And then the universe, God, keeps presenting me this deep grief, and we have to remember that opposites, like they're on the opposite spectrum. So to have expansive love and joy, you also have to be able to hold the opposite end. And seeing what I've been practicing is seeing that grief is the same gift as the joy, and that it's not wrong or it's not better than the joy. And that is when you can really like embody that, it changes everything, I find.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's a beautiful story you were talking about yesterday, in terms of when you were trying to process grief, you had others trying to quickly tell you that, like, just get over it and it'll be okay. And that's another thing that I was talking about earlier, is how much we let the external world impact us. And also equally with that, we've become so reliant on the external world that we go there for validation and we go there for comfort and we go there for support, which is such a beautiful thing in moderation, or in like different kinds of moments. But when it comes to accessing your own energy and processing your own energy, that shit should come from within, like that should never be exerted out or handed over so freely. It should be in those moments like you were talking about, of just going, okay, no, I need to stand my ground and I need to feel this right now. And like you said, the minute you did that, you felt so much better. There has been so many times where I have just cried for like a solid 5 minutes, and then I finished crying and I'm like, okay, okay, what are we doing now? Should I make banana bread? Like something wild. But it's because I've just allowed that to just exist, But you see, with children, we coddle and we try to fix, like you said earlier, we try to fix and we try to band-aid. And it's always this band-aid solution of like just packing our emotion with so much fucking bubble wrap, so that way we don't actually feel the pain, because that's going to be better for us. If we bubble wrap and fall, we're not going to feel the pain, so it's going to be great. But the minute you take that bubble wrap off, right? And I'm an analogy queen, so I'm going to keep going with them. But the minute you take that bubble wrap off, and if you've been wearing that bubble wrap for the majority of your life, you're fragile inside still, because you haven't been exposed to the external world. And so you step out into the external world, shit's going to hurt 20 times more, because you haven't allowed it to coexist with you, and you haven't allowed yourself to actually feel pain, actually feel hurt, And I think that's where, through what I do, is like, I want to encourage people to tap into it so much more. And I want to encourage discomfort. I want to show you that discomfort isn't a scary thing, or being uncomfortable isn't a scary, sad place. And it doesn't have to be. I've gotten to the point now where I feel my grief, I start laughing, because it's like, oh my God, there you are, like, and just having these moments like last Sunday when I did that breath work and the anger around sex came up initially, like the anger, I could feel it coming out of my face. And it was like, I was so fucking angry. And my friend who was facilitating, she's like, girl, I could see it on your face. Like, you were just letting it out. But then she's like, but it was kind of funny, because at the end you just started pissing yourself laughing. And I'm like, oh, because there it is. Like, I knew it was there. I knew it needed to come out. But just giving it that platform allowed it to just be for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the best thing that we can do for ourselves in this lifetime.
I agree. And I want to point out too, that point about, you said kids, when you actually, I'm a future mother to be, I cannot wait to be a mom, and I nannied for so many years. And when you let kids be kids, the first thing they do when they feel something is immediately express. They don't try to hide it. They go full out. They have little tantrums on the floor in the middle of public. They don't care, because that is actually what our body wants to do. And that is actually how we process things, is in that immediate moment when you feel it, your body wants to physically release it. And when you do just let the little kid have a moment, they're good. They're good pretty quickly, just like we are too. But it's all that, the conditioning we have that's so crazy. Yeah.
And that's another thing, is there was this moment that taught me so much. And it was just this 5-minute moment when working in retail and watching this. And it was, it was my favorite lesson. But a mum and a child walked in, and I'm in a bulk Whole Foods shop, right? And so I've got a huge section of chocolate. And this kid really wanted chocolate. And the mum said, no, sweetie, like, you've already had a muffin this morning. We made a deal. You said, like, you've had that. That was your sweet for the day. And this was the moment, right? The kid lost its shit, like went to cry town. And I loved it, because I was like, let it out, son. But the best part about all of this was the mum wasn't trying to say, you need to stop, we're in public, which I've heard that before. The mum wasn't trying to say, you need to stop, cut it out. She just kept saying, I know it probably really sucks right now, but it's going to be okay. And then I watched that, and watching how this child immediately went from angry to sad, and then he started regulating his breath, and then he was fine and he was okay. But because we have, again, another perception of kids shouldn't be crying in public, we're disturbing others, or you can't be too loud in public because you're disturbing others. And the way that this mum and child, like the way that it was just handled, was so beautiful to watch, because it was just expression. And it was like what we were talking about, like, when the fuck were we told we just can't express? Like, I would love to tantrum in the middle of a shop because I can't have chocolate.
Oh my gosh, it would be, see, that's where the balance is. Like, okay, realistically, there has to be some sort of line. And also, it's so magical when you do just watch that process. And we just have, what I'm realizing is the lack of capacity we have for discomfort and people's anything else besides joy or pleasure. Even I notice myself too, because nowadays when people ask me, how are you? And I'm actually not good, I'll say I'm okay or not good. And immediately people go, and they're just like, oh, well, let me just change the subject because now I'm uncomfortable. And I said, okay, well, don't ask me that then. But it's just funny to it's not funny. It's actually quite sad how we were never taught this. And now we don't know how to handle that. And I remember when I first dealt with grief via death of some loved ones, and barely anyone actually knew how to hold me, and they made me feel worse. And I'm actually supporting a friend right now through grief of her father who, passed unexpectedly, like with her, and how she's been saying, like, wow, it actually feels really good to talk to you, because everyone else doesn't really know what to do. And I remember that feeling too, of feeling almost worse when I shared with people because they were trying to fix me, or they were trying to tell me, oh, like one same thing, like it'll pass or whatever. And I think it's something we really got to teach. We really got to learn how to do, because holding grief is essential. We're all going to experience it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to be a part of an extraordinary trip of a lifetime where you'll be surrounded by open-minded, fun, and inspiring humans from around the world? You'll be in a space that is so safe you can express all of you, not have to hide or hold back the tears or the weird accents you love to do. The amount of unconditional love you will feel will make you feel unstoppable. You'll be in a tropical paradise surrounded by beauty in the Balinese jungle. Every day you'll eat delicious, healthy meals cooked by a local chef, and instead of cleaning up after, you'll head to the glass sauna and relax. You love growing and are ready to leap into the unknown and connect deeper to your spirituality. At the end of the week, you'll leave feeling like the weight of the world has been lifted off your shoulders. You'll be smiling ear to ear and feel as light as a feather. I will take care of all of your needs for a week at the all-inclusive Alive to Enjoy retreat this December 2nd through 10th. You can book a call with me, Lexy, at alivetoenjoy.com/retreats. And I swear this will be hands down the best way to end 2023. All genders are welcome, and all people who are here to make this world a better and brighter place.
And I think it's such a beautiful thing to tap into because, yeah, like you said, and like we've been talking about, is the conditioning that we get taught of feeling like it's not okay, and it is okay. It is absolutely okay. And discomfort is fine. It's fine. It's actually okay to just sit in anything that you're feeling. So it's something that, yeah, I will always encourage and I'll always be a huge supporter of.
Me too. One of my favorite moments in one of my yoga classes, this was, I don't even know how many years ago. I love when people cry in my classes, and she comes up to me, she's like, oh no, I cried. And I was like, I'm so happy for you. And she looked at me in pure what the fuck. And I said, no, I'm so grateful. And she's like, I was never expecting you to say that. And I asked her, how do you feel now? She's like, well, I feel good. And I said, exactly. Like, it feels good to release. And so the more we could create these safe spaces for people to go there, I think will be so magical. And also, just to like mention this again, because we haven't fully mentioned it, is like grief is a variety of emotions. It's sadness, it's anger, it's confusion, it's disbelief. There's so many other things kind of tangled in it. And so whatever is present, just letting that be. And so I'm curious of, how do you yourself or help other clients process their grief or move through it? Because we keep talking about this, but is there anything specific? Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it's dependent on what I'm feeling in that current moment and how grief shows up for me personally. I feel like the way I have begun to connect with my body, it tells me what it needs. It tells me what type of mechanism we're working with on that day. So, for example, a few weeks ago, I needed to just take the week off, and I laid on the floor for like 6 days, not the couch, not the bed, like the floor. And just, I was giving myself womb massages and crying and getting angry and doing yoga. But I think the best thing, if you're just starting out, to, I guess, recognize that grief exists within you and how to validate it and give it the space and the platform to exist, is just by doing that. I think if you're initially just coming into the space of allowing grief to be a part of your world, is just to acknowledge it. I think that's the initial step, is acknowledge that it just as much exists as any other emotion that you're feeling. And so once you give it that platform and that space, then it's about questioning it. So it's like, okay, now I've made an acknowledgement, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. Questioning it next and going, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why is this coming up for me? Then, without judgment and without trying to curate the perfect answer, like allowing whatever comes up first to be your answer. So if it is quite simple or if it is extensive, just sitting in that space of allowing it to be. And then going into a next step of like, okay, what do I need right now? And you'll find that the first few times of stepping into this space of acknowledgement and then questioning, you may not actually know what you need because you haven't allowed yourself to be in this environment for a while. So again, without judgment, if you don't know, that's okay. Maybe you just need to sit there with it for a second. And quieting the mind, I think a lot of us, like, we tell ourselves we don't know what we need when in fact we really do know. And if you just let your mind tell you, actually, you let your soul tell you. You know, sometimes our mind can be a little playful soul, but yeah, if you let your soul just like speak to you and tell you what it needs in that moment. And actually a practitioner that I was working with a few years ago, she gave me this really beautiful tool of set a timer for 5 minutes. If you've got the time, set a timer for 5 minutes. Don't expect anything. Sit there and just let your mind go nuts. Like, let it go crazy. Let all of this stuff come up. And that is also giving yourself the platform to exist, because you're not trying to control what you're about to think. You're not trying to control what you want to feel. You're just being. And so that's something that I bring into my spaces with my clients as well, is like, don't put pressure on yourself in any circumstance on how you should show up for something. Let your body show you what it needs. Let your body show you how it wants to exert. And if that's tears, if that's crying, if that's, I don't know, like crying into a pillow, screaming into a pillow, it's something that is what I like to call a controlled state of anger. So what I mean by that is not using anger or violence in a way that it is harming others or yourself, but allowing it to exist. So if you do need to exert that anger, it's exerting it in a way that is actually progressive and not suppressive.
Yeah.
So they're just, I guess, the first steps.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I also similarly agree. And I think one of the biggest things that helped me is the slowdown, because I remember one of the first moments that I felt grief outside of like the initial shock of the grief, whatever event caused it, was I was in my room about to do yoga and I was distracting myself left and right, cleaning, going on my phone, doing everything possible to not do yoga. And I didn't know why. And then I finally, something in me, my intuition just got so loud and asked me, Lexi, please sit down and just, even if you don't want to do yoga, just like sit down, lay on the floor, kind of like you said. And in that slowdown, finally, it was able to bubble up. And then I realized that like 3 years ago, my friend had passed that day, and these are the memories. But it's so interesting in the slowdown, but we have a really hard time slowing down, because that's when those emotions start to come up, and then we don't even recognize it until you've gained some awareness. And then you just randomly, without even realizing it, you're distracting yourself. You're not doing you're not doing the slow down activity, and you keep distracting because you're not used to holding those sensations of discomfort or deep sadness or anger or whatever it is that you're feeling. And so the initial reaction of the ego doesn't want discomfort. The ego doesn't want to feel that, and so sitting your ass down, like you said, that 5-minute timer has helped me so much. And just saying, I can do this. I can do this. And I'm going to just sit for 5 minutes. And you're sitting here listening to two women that will put their hands down and vouch for how magical it is to actually feel. And when you don't keep only just feeling like a teensy bit, and we just go all in and like dive headfirst into those emotions, it is magic. Like now I'm not addicted, but I'm just like, yes, bring it to me. Like I want to feel. And that just brings a new depths to every single one of your relationships, because now that I can hold that within myself, I can hold that within someone else. When I notice someone feeling sad or grief or anything, I can pick up on it, and even if I just look them in the eyes and they're in that wobbly of a state, boom, they can go there, because my body is safe enough, because my nervous system has been there. So you're not only doing it for yourself, you're creating a ripple effect to everyone in your life. And like, if that's not motivating enough, I don't know what else is.
And in that, because you are doing that, you're sitting in your truth so much more, because you're not putting the facade, you're not putting a front up, you're just literally owning the fact that things are shit sometimes, but it does and it will always be better, and it's because you're allowing it to exist, and it's because you're allowing it to have its platform, that you can turn around and just be like, yep, this is a shitty day. This is a shitty moment. How are you? You know, and just living with that knowledge and living with that expansiveness of all versions of yourself is the best kind of way to live, because you're not actually dimming any light within you. You're just exuding whatever you are for that day. And I think that is the best way to be. And like you said, I can vouch, we can vouch.
And I also want to add, it's the sexiest quality. Like, you and your truth is liberating, because it's like, oh wait, like you feel that too. I feel that too. And authenticity, like, I don't know why, but it just is. It's naturally sexy to see someone in that. So it's gonna make you sexier.
And if that's not a plus, then I don't know what is.
But something really important I do want to speak on, which I've actually been navigating right now, is when my heart is, maybe even a little bit more closed, or it's just like I am not like, I'm more like down, I'm closed off, I'm feeling isolated, antisocial. That's kind of what I've been going through this past week. And showing up in public settings like that, knowing you're not your quote unquote typical self, and letting people how to hold that, how to hold yourself in those moments when you really don't have much to give in front of others. How do you navigate that?
I'm honest. I'm honest when I don't have capacity. Like I'm honest when I just need to be held. And you know what? In saying that, there's times where I'm not honest as well. So I'm still figuring it out, and I'm still learning too. And I actually had a friend recently tell me, he's like, I love you, and I know that you've got this, and I know that you're capable of moving through emotion. He's like, but you need to let me in, and you need to let me give to you now. And as soon as he said that, I fell into his arms and I just cried, because I was like, fuck, okay. Like, allowing yourself to be honest with the people around you and with yourself, with what you're needing. And if that's someone to, literally coddle you and take you in and cradle you, or if it's, okay, I know that being in public settings is probably not what I need right now, because I'm highly sensitive. And when you are highly sensitive, in the terms of energetics, you start to tap into a lot of energy around you. So it amplifies, and it's a bit more than what you would normally expect it to be. I don't know about you, but for myself, if I am in that heightened state and my heart is feeling really fragile, when I go into a restaurant or a cafe, or somewhere where there is a lot of energy, I'm like, fuck, and I just order the most random thing off the menu, because I'm not actually in my body. I'm just like it's just too much.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just allowing yourself, like we were talking about maybe with grief as well, of just knowing what your body needs and asking your body what it needs, and then in turn also asking the people around you, and feeling okay to just sit in a receiving, or sit in where you are in that moment, and allowing yourself and people to just take care and nurture yourself. Really the best thing for when your heart maybe feels a little bit more on the fragile side.
Yes.
And again, yeah,
I agree. I think that the honesty is key, because whether you're saying it or not, people can pick up on it. And most likely in those situations, they take it personally and think it's them. Whereas, they don't know what's going on, but they can feel it, and you can feel it too. And then when you're not saying anything, which I've done so many times, and I actually did a few days last week, and then I finally found my voice again, which is also okay, because my nervous system is used to being in free states, with other people, with new people, because I've been around new people. And yeah, just like slowly encouraging your voice to be heard in those moments, and speaking whatever is true to you. And then also taking that, like I was explaining earlier, like declaring the space you need. If you need isolation, if you need alone time, doing that as well. But I think the more honest you can be in those moments, the more love you will receive. And that's so funny, because in deep grief, we are craving love, yet we're pushing love away. We want to isolate, which I do think is important to isolate. But often we're not sharing what's actually happening. And if we would, people want to just cover us in love. When you share grief with someone, it's a natural response. Like, I can't even tell you how many strangers during this heartache have just, as soon as I told them, they're like, oh my gosh, and just like showering me. And if I wouldn't have opened myself up, that wouldn't have been there. So you're almost like blocking yourself from what you're actually desiring.
100%. And I think the isolation in the terms of not letting love in when you are feeling pain comes from the shame of not admitting that you're not okay, you know? And it's like we feel like we have to do it on our own because we've been taught for so long. And this comes back into that conditioning of like not admitting to others that we're not actually doing okay, because we need to be this strong soldier all the time, and we can't not have our shit together all the time, because who wants that? You know, it's that pattern of putting up a front and needing to be okay and not feeling grief and not feeling discomfort. It's all the things we've just spoken about into this facade that we need to put out into the world. And then with that comes not actually asking people for what we need, and not actually showing up in an authentic way of saying, I'm really not okay, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And I think that's the biggest key here, is that we don't actually want to be vulnerable around people. That's probably the most safeguarded element of ourselves that we don't share enough with people. And I think vulnerability is the best platform to express yourself from, because it's your truth. It's where you're at in that current moment. And sometimes with vulnerability, I mean, everything stems from vulnerability. You know, love stems from vulnerability. To let love in, you have to be vulnerable. And look how beautiful that is, you know, and that's in all spaces. So I think it is about recognizing when you're in that isolation of how much time you do need for yourself, but then how much you can open that window up to allowing the outside world to hold you in that space too. And then giving it maybe like an 80-20%, you know, like, okay, I need this much for me, but then I'm able and I have the capacity to receive this much from others.
Mm-hmm. So many things I want to say. One is the vulnerability piece. I will also add that there's a reason we have a hard time being vulnerable, because of how people have responded. For instance, what I just experienced yesterday. However, at this point in my life, I have the capacity to boldly stand in my truth, even when someone is not receiving my vulnerability. And that takes time. And don't be worried if that doesn't feel okay yet, because especially when you're new to being vulnerable, it's really uncomfortable when someone can't hold you, because it's already like a huge feat for you to do that. So having the compassion and having the knowing that when you are vulnerable, it won't always be received in the way you need. And that doesn't make your vulnerability wrong. It doesn't make what you're speaking not true or any less valuable or any of those things. Just understanding that not everyone has that capacity within themselves. That's all it means, is they haven't gone there within themselves. Because if you have, then there's just no other way that you couldn't be there for someone.
Absolutely. And I think what you just mentioned there of we don't know how to receive that vulnerability, like, because we are taught to block it. And one thing that I'll always express whenever I hold a circle or whenever I hold space for someone is I'll have tissues in the room, or I'll have, you know, these tools nearby if you need them, but I'll always allow your tears to flow. I'll always allow your energy to flow. And I think that's an important message of, if I am speaking to anyone that is unsure of how to show up for someone that needs that comfort and needs that support, sometimes it's quite literally just sitting there and being with that person. It's not trying to fix them. It's not trying to ambush them with wiping their tears or giving them a tissue or giving them a hug like straight away. It's like, allow it to flow first and then ask them what they need, because sometimes they'll be able to tell you. And I think all of those things are beautiful gestures, yes, to some extent. But one thing that I know for myself personally is their slight expressions of telling me that it's not okay to express, you know, like handing someone tissue, you might think is a beautiful gesture, but that's like, you need to stop, you need to cry that, you need to wipe that tear. And I know that sounds so wazzo and so crazy to some people, but it's something that I've been working with as well, because it's a way that you quickly want to coddle again, and it's that suppression. It's that, oh no, I need to fix this, I need to stop this, how do I make it stop, you know, how do I make the tears go away? And so yeah, that's probably one thing that I would say if you are in a space of wanting to learn how to show up for somebody.
Yeah, that's super beautiful. And I remember one of the first times someone handed me a tissue and I said, I don't want that. I'll just let my tears cry. And they were like taken back and it felt so good. And I also want to point out too, like some of my favorite times with my past lover was when I experienced the grief of my grandpa when I was with him and he just held me. And I love physical touch. So for me, that feels good. But I know for a lot of people, you don't want to be touched in those moments. But when he just didn't even say a single thing, but just held the energy of love and physically held me, that felt better than any words he could have possibly told me in that moment. And I think we forget, like we complicate in our head, what do I say? Because when I first was on the receiving end of grief, I was like, fuck, Googling everything. How do I respond? Like, what do I do in this moment? And truly the best, like most nourishing thing is that simple presence of just not saying anything but just being with. And like you said, it's so powerful and it really gets to be that simple. And it takes time because once again it's that back to that thing of discomfort. It is uncomfortable, and yet that's all they need is just space to be, because everyone else is telling them to cover it up or not be. So when they can just express it. And something else that I find once that initial feeling phase has gone by is to ask questions about their grief instead of avoiding the topic and making a left turn and changing the conversation to something else, something more positive. Is going deeper, taking them deeper into that sensation and that story of what are they going through. And if it's someone that died, like tell me about them. What are your favorite memories with them? Or, really getting curious about that relationship they had that they're grieving, or the job or whatever it is. And that lets them process it because they no longer have to avoid it.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, and super important as well, because it gives it a different type of platform, and you start to look at grief from the space and the perspective and the lens of love and honoring rather than anger and pain. Whilst the grief that you may be feeling might be anger and pain, if you start to look at it from the perspective of love and honoring in a way that recognizes all the good moments of that grief, it allows it to be rewired in your brain to say that, okay, it isn't all bad. It isn't all negative. It isn't all painful. It's like there is so much of this that is allowed to exist now. Just because we have lost something, or just because we have lost something or had to move through the transition of letting go, it doesn't mean that we have to have such a negative or sad annotation towards grief. Grief can actually be quite a beautiful thing.
I always like that quote that says, grief is how much you loved, like how deeply you loved. And it's so true. Well, for a physical loss, but even like past versions of yourself, or even situations or things, houses, everything. It's just like how deep of a connection you had to that thing. And so, yeah, just remembering that it's not all sadness, I think is really important. And thanks for reminding us of that. So I would love to hear, actually, I'm going to ask the last question of the podcast, which is, what is one of the most romantic moments or dates that you've been on?
Oh, with myself or with somebody?
Let's go with somebody, since you shared a romantic one with yourself at the beginning.
I did. I do love a good self date. I would have to say the most romantic thing somebody has done for me. It was one of I'd say it probably was our second date. It's a beautiful man that I met while I was on the coast, who ended up is one of my good friends now. But he tapped into the idea or the knowing of me that I love being outdoors. I love picnics. I love sunsets. I love anything that connects me with nature. And so he, I think we only knew each other for about 2 weeks. And our second date, he went out and bought all this beautiful like picnic basket, picnic rug, and like all of these things that like oozed Lori. He he picked me up with flowers at my door, which I am such an old school romantic. It was the most beautiful thing. I know.
I love
I
that.
love it. He picked me up at my door with flowers. He took me to the local like little wine and cheese bar so we could pick out some wine and some nice cheeses. And then he took me to my favorite spot on the hill so we could watch sunset. And he set up this incredible picnic. And we just watched sunset and talked till it was dark. And then we were eating all our favorite foods. And the questions we were asking each other were so in depth, and they weren't the typical questions that I have experienced through a relationship or through dating. It was really about like wanting to get to know on a soul level about me and each other. And then so we had that. It was really beautiful. And it was also like spitting that day. So mind you, we're out there, we're watching the sunset, and we've got this incredible picnic, but he also prepped the back of his car just in case. And so it was just those little elements where it was like, I see you, I honor you, and I know that these are the things that you love, and I want to show you that I'm actively listening. That really stood out to me. And then he finished off the night, like if the cheeses and the wine weren't enough, he's like, okay, I've booked us a table and we're going out for dinner now. And I'm like, what? I thought this was dinner. And so he took me to one of my favorite restaurants on the coast. And again, it's that listening and it's the attentiveness. And while we were at this dinner, you know, like making sure that I'm in that space with him. It wasn't coming from a space of like, let me show you all these big flashy things I can do for you. It was like, I know that these are the things that you need or you love to experience while you're in a relationship, of just having someone just show up in a way that honors the space. And I just really felt that, because it went through all the different motions of the way that I like to love and receive love. And, you know, even though the acts of service was so incredible, just the connection we had that night was probably the best part of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I love that. And that's what I'm a preacher on, is how simple romance is. It's really just the listening and thoughtfulness. It's really not that hard. And the fact that you could experience on a second date, and the effort, we're so used to just what's the easiest possible way I can get this done. Whereas when there's a little bit of intention and effort, it feels so yum to just know that you're special and cherished and cared for. So I love it. Thanks for sharing that beautiful story. And now let us know, what are your offerings and how anyone can work with you and where to find you.
Beautiful. So I'm based in Melbourne at the moment, Melbourne, Victoria, and that's in Australia, because I know that you are worldwide, girl. So anyone that is in Victoria and are wanting an in-person offering, I operate out of a clinic in Diamond Creek on Saturdays. Otherwise, I do online Reiki and energy readings and healings. You can find all of it on my website. That's LoridanaMaree.com. I'm sure Lex will share my Instagram, so it's also in my bio. But even if you are just wanting to connect and reach out and just chat about anything we've talked about in this podcast, that's an offering within itself. I love connecting with new people. So please pop in, say hi, and just share a little bit about yourself. And if I can assist you in any way, I am here, and I've got a lot of love to give.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You made it to the end of the episode, so now it's time for our snuggly heart breath of the day. Place a hand or both hands, if it's safe to do so, over your heart and take a big breath into your heart center. Open your mouth and let it go. I'm so grateful to have shared this time with you. If you enjoyed this convo, please share with your besties and your fam. And if you're a visual person like me, fly over to YouTube and watch the video. If you want to do a random act of kindness today, please leave a 5-star review so more people in the world can get their heart snuggled. You're helping tremendously when you do this, so thank you so much. And as a gift for doing so, I'll give you my Soften Your Heart Medi that feels like an exhale and a hug from within. When you leave a review and email me the screenshot to heartsnuggles@alivetoenjoy.com, you can also find the email in the show notes and you'll get the free meditation. Sending you the warmest, comfiest hug and lots of unexpected blessings your way. Remember that every single person just wants to be loved. So how can you be loved today?